The public is being conditioned to look to the sky for hypersonic missiles. This is a fatal misdirection. The launch on warning protocol is no longer about symmetric kinetic exchange. The primary vector is systemic silence. The true strategic objective is not to level a city, but to sever the central nervous system of global finance. Analysts at CSIS have mapped the critical vulnerability, the network of undersea cables carrying 99% of all transcontinental data traffic. This is the kill switch. Simultaneously, state-level actors conduct anti-drone drills not just for defense, but as a blueprint for offensive satellite blinding operations. The goal is to create a communications blackout, to disable the eyes and ears of the dominant military and economic power. This creates the blind Leviathan, a nation-state with unparalleled military hardware. But it cannot see targets, communicate with its fleets, or process financial transactions. Its strength becomes a stranded asset, a liability. The attack doesn't require a warhead. It requires a pair of shears in the deep ocean and a laser in low Earth orbit. The resulting liquidity crisis would be instantaneous, detonating the domestic solvency crisis that is already at a breaking point. The kinetic cost is near zero. The economic cost is terminal. The calculus is not one of strength, but of weakness. A nation-state does not initiate a high-risk conflict when it is robust. It does so when it faces an internal solvency crisis. The war is a liquidity event. Authoritative analysis from CSIS frames the Russian Federation's kinetic pivot as a direct function of domestic liability. An unpopular, resource-draining, symmetric war becomes an existential threat to the regime itself. The state's balance sheet, bleeding political and economic capital, can no longer sustain a peer-to-peer engagement. This is the trigger for the asymmetric pivot. The objective shifts from conventional victory to systemic disruption. By leveraging low-cost vectors, the state exports its internal crisis, forcing the external adversary to bear the economic and political cost. Weakness forces the hand, making asymmetric escalation not an option, but a mathematical necessity for regime survival. The core calculation of modern warfare has inverted. The Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, frames the new kinetic cost basis. A single main battle tank represents an asset worth approximately $5 million. The FPV drone that can achieve a mission kill on that tank costs $500. This is not a balanced equation. It is a strategic exploit. This is the democratization of violence. It's a clinical term for the reality that the capacity to inflict strategic-level damage is no longer the exclusive domain of superpowers. The barrier to entry for projecting force has collapsed. An adversary doesn't need to match a carrier strike group. They just need to leverage off-the-shelf technology to threaten critical economic nodes. The defensive protocol becomes economically unsustainable. Major powers are already reacting. As documented, China's military is now running drills using shipborne missiles to counter drone swarms. This is the playbook. Force the defender to expend a multi-million-dollar interceptor to neutralize a threat that costs less than a used car. This is a launch-on-warning protocol designed to drain an adversary's treasury, not their military stockpiles. The adversary's objective is not to win a symmetric engagement. The vector of attack is economic. They weaponize your own solvency crisis against you. Each asymmetric strike forces a choice: absorb the economically crippling damage, confirming internal fragility, or retaliate with a disproportionate response that triggers an uncontrollable escalatory spiral. The lethality is engineered to be financial. The regional instability you are shown is not the conflict. It is a laboratory. These territories, from the Middle East to warnings cited by RUSANSI about potential fractures in nations like South Africa, are no longer sovereign battlefields. They are designated gray zones, proxy staging areas for calibrating asymmetric attacks against the primary target, Western economic viability. The protocol is brutally efficient. A localized event, like the Iran crisis, is leveraged not for regional gain, but for its global economic impact. As Reuters confirms, such a crisis provides a starker swing factor for oil prices. This is a weaponized commodity shock, engineered to directly attack the systemic vulnerability identified by Forbes, the population's real affordability crisis. The kinetic instability over there becomes a direct liquidity crisis in your bank account. These gray zones are also hardware testbeds. While economic pressure is applied, new kinetic vectors are refined. CSIS reports indicate that the lessons from low-cost drone warfare are being scaled for systemic disruption. China's publicized anti-drone drills are not merely defensive posturing. According to Interesting Engineering, they are actively wargaming shipborne missile defenses against swarm attacks, a direct acknowledgement that this asymmetric capability, perfected in proxy theaters, is the next operational threat. This is the blueprint for asymmetric escalation. The gray zone serves as the firing solution. It allows an adversary to apply precise, low-cost pressure, both economic and kinetic, on a power whose domestic solvency is its primary liability. The mathematical certainty is that these proxy laboratories are not a symptom of global chaos. They are the dedicated staging grounds for triggering a zero-sum choice between economic collapse and kinetic conflict. The nuclear deterrent is built on a doctrine known as launch on warning. The protocol is not to retaliate after impact, but to launch a full-scale counterstrike the moment early warning systems detect an incoming attack. The logic is a function of cold mathematics. You must launch your assets before they are destroyed in their silos. This ensures mutually assured destruction. It is a system predicated on the absolute integrity of sensor data. This doctrine is now the single greatest point of systemic failure. The new vector for escalation is not a missile, but a line of code. According to CSIS analysis, adversary cyber operations now actively target nuclear command, control, and communications infrastructure. This creates what strategists term the fog of digital war. Consider the commander's zero-sum dilemma. An adversary executes a cyber attack, blinding the ballistic missile early warning system. The screen goes black. This is not a passive event. It is an act of aggression. Is it a system malfunction, or is it a deliberate blinding maneuver to mask a first strike that is already airborne? The decision window is less than 15 minutes. To wait for secondary confirmation is to risk total annihilation if the attack is real. To execute launch on warning based on the absence of data, out of fear, is to initiate global kinetic exchange based on a potential bluff. The asymmetric attack forces the defender to gamble with planetary solvency. The adversary does not need to fire a shot. They simply force the target to run its own self-destruct protocol. The domestic affordability crisis is no longer a domestic issue. It is a publicly declared strategic liability. Forbes confirms that wage growth is decoupled from the cost of survival. This solvency gap is now the primary target vector for asymmetric warfare. Adversaries understand this blueprint. A nation's inability to afford its own existence is the accelerant for kinetic conflict. Reports from RUSI indicate a doctrinal shift towards low-cost, high-impact economic attacks designed to test a brittle system. The goal is not destruction, it is calibration. They need to measure the response latency. They need to quantify the political paralysis. An event must be engineered that is economically catastrophic but offers zero justification for a kinetic response. It must be a force majeure, an act of God, an unfortunate system failure. The calibration shot. Within the next 12 months, expect a catastrophic, cascading data corruption event targeting the logistics and container management systems of a primary U.S. West Coast port. It will not be a blackout, it will be a logic bomb, a digital paralytic. Attribution will be impossible, officially blamed on a software update glitch or a phantom ransomware group. The kinetic cost is zero. The economic cost will be a multi-billion-dollar liquidity shock per day, magnifying the affordability crisis into a national security emergency. The West's response, or lack thereof, will provide the final data set required before initiating the next phase.